Man, oh man, it feels like it's been a really long time since we've done a discussion video on this channel, and it's not because I just didn't have any ideas or didn't want to make any videos, but as I posted on the community tab a couple days ago, I've just been sick the past week. I'm still sick right now, but man, I just can't wait to make more videos. I have so many ideas that I've been writing down all throughout these days that I've been sick, and I just couldn't wait any longer. So this first video, we're going to be talking about Master Rule 5 / what comes after link summoning. And if you're a TCG player and have never heard of Master Rule 4 or Master Rule 3 or whatever, just having to do with Master Rules, that's perfectly fine because it's not an official TCG term. It's actually only for the OCG, but I feel like ever since Master Rule 3 especially, TCG players have really adopted that terminology. It's just the easiest way to explain some recent rule changes. Basically, in the OCG, whenever there's a new mechanic introduced or a new ruling update, they call it a Master Rule, and this sort of translates into the TCG as well, usually with our new starter decks in the summer. Now, what has happened in the past with these Master Rules, I think a lot of people remember Master Rule 3. That was not only the introduction of pendulum summoning, but also removed the first turn draw and also changed the field spell rulings, and I've talked about all those things in past videos. And then Master Rule 4 moved the pendulum zones and then also introduced not only link summoning, but the extra monster zone mechanic just as a whole, and that's kind of where we're at right now. And right now in the OCG, they just got announced their very last Master Rule 4 set, so we can be expecting here, maybe not by the end of 2019, but at least by early 2020, we will know whatever the OCG is doing, which will then be added into the TCG after WCQ season next summer. I don't really know what's going to happen. We can never predict it. If you would have told people way back in like 2005 about pendulum summoning and link summoning, they probably never would have believed you, but I want to take today's sort of video here to talk about some of my predictions for what the next Master Rule will be. My first prediction is that I do not feel the current mat sort of layout will be edited in any way, shape, or form. So they might add a new zone where one of the blank spots is next to the extra monster zones, but I don't feel it'll be rearranged in the same way that it was changed for pendulum summoning and then eventually link summoning. I think at this point, Konami recognizes and did recognize, especially when pendulums came out, that rearranging the core layout of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Mat really just confuses everyone, new and old players, and I think for the core sort of values of Yu-Gi-Oh! One of them has to be the field layout stays the same. For the longest time, other than just pendulum summoning, you could look at a Yu-Gi-Oh! Mat even if you haven't played in 10 years and kind of know what's going on. Sure, the extra monster zones complicate that a little bit, but even with those right there, I think most people can kind of figure out what's happening if they look at a Yu-Gi-Oh! Game. And I especially believe this because of the pendulum zones getting moved into the back row, which I do believe it was in part because of balance changes, but also I believe Konami just wanted to get to an older field style. Prediction number 2, I do not feel that Konami will expand the space in the extra deck. I see this comment so often, and especially from players that use really extra deck heavy strategies. I know you guys want just a couple more spots in the extra deck, but I really don't think Konami will do that. Keep in mind here that one of the original Master Rules was to reduce the extra deck to 15 cards, and I think that even though it could be changed in the future, it seems really unlikely. Part of the skill in deck building and playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Isn't just what you put in your main deck and side deck, but also what cards you put in your extra deck. And I know it can be tough sometimes, especially if your archetype needs multiple slots in your extra deck to actually do the normal combos, but a lot of players have cards that they would play for specific purposes if there were more spots in the extra deck. And while that might sound good, it also sounds bad from the perspective of, do you want to play against Lunaloy Orcus, a deck that's already one of the top strategies, but a deck that is balanced in part by its very tight extra deck? If you gave them a few more spots, they could play even more specific rank 4 monsters for various matchups, making that deck even more powerful. When you give more extra deck slots to these really big combo strategies, well then you just put them at an even bigger advantage because now they have even more options. There are so many times when you go and watch combo deck profiles where the person says, oh, I wish I just had 1 or 2 more spots in my extra deck for this very specific card to out specific boards. Part of the way that Konami has balanced these newer combo decks is by limiting their extra deck space by requiring them to play specific cards. If you think about the Orcus engine, for example, you have to play the Galatea, you have to play the Dingirsu, you have to play the Longirsu. Previously you had to play Nightmare Mermaid and Nightmare Phoenix. That's a lot of extra deck spots just to play that one combo. But by doing this, you prevent these combo decks from playing every single specific extra deck card, maybe like Borolo Dragon, a card that a lot of people want to play play but can't always fit in. By expanding the extra deck, these combo decks have to make less hard decisions about which cards they actually want to put in there to sort of narrow it down to 15, and I think that's a bad thing overall. Sure, I've played some of those combo decks and I want to have a bigger extra deck in those cases, but I think for the overall health of the game, 15, at least for right now, is a perfectly reasonable number. Prediction number 3, I do not think that Konami will restrict special summoning as far as like restricting you to just 5 special summons a turn or just 7 special summons a turn. I'm actually going to make an entire video talking about that in a few weeks here, so make sure to watch out for that, but I'll just say it right now. And trust me, I totally get where you guys are coming from, especially the old school players, especially the casual players that don't like playing against combo decks. You just play against them and you go, well, this doesn't seem fair, especially summoning 10, 20 times in one turn. And while I would probably argue against that and say most decks aren't special summoning 10, 20 times in one turn, I'm aware that some decks are actually capable of doing that, and I can definitely take a few guesses as to what decks you played against to make you leave those sort of comments. The problem is, and I'll talk about this when I actually make a full video discussing this, is that power is all relative. You know, right now some decks get more powerful by having unlimited special summons, but if you restrict those special summons, yes, you're not doing as many summons in one turn, but the power level is all just based on who can actually do 5 summons in every single turn or 10 summons in every single turn, whatever the restriction is. So then the power creep gets to the point of not how many special summons you can do in a turn and what your end board is, but how impactful each individual special summon actually is, which means that over time it's no longer about decks that have a bunch of little monsters climbing into big monsters, but it's just decks where every single special summon is a huge impactful monster, because that's how power creep has to work in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh! With this rule. So now that we've talked about a couple of different things that I feel Konami probably won't change with the Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Rule 5, I want to talk about a couple of things that I feel could actually conceivably happen for a few different reasons. That being said, prediction number 4, which is something that I feel could happen, is spell cards with link arrows. Now, as I'm told, this actually has happened in the anime, and I think it could be a great idea if expanded upon in the actual TCG. One of the reasons that I feel this is such a good idea is that it's not that crazy, it's not that different from what we already have. I think most people could understand pretty easily after reading those cards, if you already understood link arrows on extra deck monsters, that okay, yeah, if you play it in the spell and trap card zone, it points, and that works as well with field spells because the field spell column is in the top left hand corner of whoever controls it. So if you had a field spell with like a right pointing arrow, it could actually work that way. I think that this would be like sort of a half step into a new mechanic. I mean, certainly we have not seen spell cards with link arrows in the TCG, but link arrows are already in the game. People pretty much understand them by this point. I think that if I was Konami trying to just make a small adjustment and a small new change, something to keep it fresh, this would be the direction that I would go into. Now, I don't know if this would really work in an anime context, because how are they going to have an ace monster if the new mechanic is a spell card, but I still think conceptually from a gameplay standpoint, it absolutely would be a great decision. Prediction number 5 is funny for a few reasons, but I think it's pretty conceivable that it could happen, and that is skill cards in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. Now, this is already happening in speed dueling, which is why some people might say, well, this would never get added into the TCG, it's already being printed in this alternative format. But what's funny about this is that I actually predicted this would happen before speed dueling came out. So when I first started playing Duel Links competitively and I got a real understanding for how impactful and game altering these skills can be in that game, I said many times in live streams and maybe even in a few videos that I wouldn't be surprised if Konami started printing physical skill cards for the next Master Rule. What's funny about this though, of course we now know this, is that Konami actually did end up doing this just for speed dueling, not for the actual TCG. Now, one thing I want to stress here is that I don't feel that the skill cards that would be added into the TCG are the ones that are currently in speed dueling, nor would they be the skills that are currently in Duel Links. Because the TCG has so many more cards than both of those games, you really would need to build skill cards to be very, very weak initially, like attack boosts, not really deck searching abilities, not really special summoning abilities. So if they were to add skill cards into the TCG as Master Rule 5, I think it could be done, but it would be a very difficult thing to balance, and Konami would really have to spend the time and resources to not just borrow from Duel Links and borrow from speed dueling, but actually make all new skill cards for the TCG specifically. Number 6, my prediction for something that could happen is deck masters / planeswalkers, cards like those. My friend Farfa actually did a fantastic fantastic video breaking down what deck masters in Yu-Gi-Oh could look like. I'm going to link that in the description below so that you guys can go check it out. But the gist here is that you have these big monsters with powerful effects that have summoning requirements. They're sort of like quests in Hearthstone, if you guys play that game as well. Things that you have to meet the activation or summoning condition before you can actually play, but once they hit the board, they're really, really impactful, but there's only one in your entire deck. I think this could be a very cool idea if, once again, Konami managed them properly. You'd have to really balance the idea of how many cards you'd have to invest to bring them out in the first place, or what their activation requirement actually is, with how impactful they are on the board, because Yu-Gi-Oh is a very fast game, so even if a card had a requirement like summon 10 dragon monsters, that might be not that difficult for some guard dragon decks right now. I also feel that deck master is very similar to skill cards. I guess it's another benefit of having those. Could fit really nicely into the current field layout just next to the extra monster zones. I think that it's pretty likely, if Konami actually does add a new mechanic that's really, really big and different, like skill cards like deck masters, that they will take advantage of one of or multiple of the blank spots next to the extra monster zones. Anyway though, I think it pretty much wraps up everything I have to say about Master Rule 5 for this one video, and I really can't tell you guys how good it feels to sit down and actually record a discussion. Sorry I sound really sick in this video. I know it's going to sound awful, but I couldn't wait any longer. I had to talk about something, and this is like the biggest thing on my list right now. Anyway though, I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.